This week on the Virtual Skeptics, it's our 100th episode. Everybody scream!
Yay!
Bob has fun storming the castle. Eve makes a psychic prediction. I think she will. Barb may be feeling blue, and Tim's on fire. He's actually going to set himself on fire. I'm your host, Brian Gregory, and I completely forgot my joke. I was going to say something about activating my... What were we talking about?
Your thingy and the what's it?
Man vegetable, wasn't it?
Yes, no, it was not. Thanks, Bob, for leading that conversation over into the live show.
No
Hi,
problem.
this is the Virtual Skeptics. Thanks for watching. I'm not going to apologize this week. Let's see. I've got people with me. Let me introduce the crew. Everybody do the gang signs. No, don't do the gang signs. Bob Blaskiewicz, CSI's conspiracy guy, web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Swift blog contributor. Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities and contributor to Skepticality. Tim Farley, former JRF fellow, blogger at SkepTools, Skepticality contributor and creator of What's the Harm, and Barbara Drescher, former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, and contributor to numerous blah 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 skeptical projects, including The Odds Must Be Crazy, which I like to say that way. From now on, I'm going to say it that way. Hi.
You should emphasize the crazy with crazy.
Crazy. Yes, crazy. This is our 100th episode, which
It
is
is.
yeah, it's an arbitrarily large round number that we're going to celebrate because we feel like it. So there. Now we got that out of our system. If you're watching and you want to participate in this 100th milestone episode, you can in several ways. You can tweet with hashtag Virtual Skeptics, and you can comment on the YouTube, and you can do this other thing, this Q&A app, which I think I didn't. Let me see. Let me make sure did I set it up? I think I set it up. So you can question the weirdos that are talking in the little window by submitting a question that way as well, and we will try to work you into the show. First up, the things we do every week, starting with the trivia question. And Tim has a trivia question.
This should be an easy one for folks that are paying attention and consume all the things that we tell you to consume.
Thank you for following instructions.
Newspaper horoscopes.
Yay.
They're everywhere, and they're annoying. But they didn't used to be in every newspaper. They actually started at a certain time. They became popular starting in England after a newspaper published a horoscope for what famous baby in 1930?
In 1930, which
1930, a baby was born.
That wasn't that long ago.
There was a horoscope written for this baby in the paper, and people loved it, and it became a regular feature. Who am I speaking of?
1930? I have no idea.
That is incorrect. Oh.
I have no idea. Okay, so while you guys are thinking about that and trying to desperately get it submitted onto one of those 3 channels I mentioned as fast as you possibly can so that you win the prize, which, is our happiness, I think.
It's some anniversary cake if you brought cake.
Yes. If you brought your anniversary cake, you can have some of it if you get the question right. Also, our secondary quiz of quizziness is there's 2 screens behind me, one there, and that was not a gesture. That was a gang sign. No.
Well, it was a gesture.
Careful.
It's unintentional. There's a couple of. There we go. Let me do this. Do that one. There's 2 screens there. If you can guess what they are, you will also get a piece of your own anniversary cake. Maybe a bigger one if you get this right than the other one. So there we go. And people are already submitting. Wow, you got to be quick around here. So, moving right along, Eve is up first. And Eve
Yes.
is gonna. Well, I predict that Eve is going to do something interesting.
Oh, you're wrong.
No.
So wrong. I want to know, when we find out who had that first astrology reading, I want to know how accurate it was. Because I'm concerned this week about predictions. Because, stuff's been going on recently. I don't know if you noticed that.
Stuff.
And, yeah. And
Always stuff.
as we all know, at the end of the year, psychics list predictions for the new year. And I know it's kind of early to check their work, but I decided to sort of check in to see whether some important events from this year had been predicted. Of course, I couldn't check every psychic's predictions. So what I did was, I looked at several compilations of predictions and also searched for specific events. So this is my report on psychic predictions for major events. Several psychics claim, and this is sort of going to be a recurring theme, that some psychics claim they have predicted some of these major events. So some psychics claim to have predicted the Malaysian Airlines disasters, the disappearance of MH370, and the shooting down of MH17. But I couldn't find any specific predictions that actually were predictions, before anything actually happened. There have been some vague references to aviation disasters, yes, but anything that would specifically identify these two specific disasters, not so terribly much. There have also been predictions about MH37 or 370 after it disappeared. Predictions about what happened, where it went, where it could be found. These are kind of hard to assess, though, because it hasn't been found.
It's just been found.
Yeah, and certainly oh, wow. Who would have thought it would come to Bob's iPad? But certainly none of these predictions have been of any value to searchers, for instance. And even if some of them turn out to be, correct, lots of non-psychic people have been speculating about where it went down, what happened, for months now. So some of them are bound to be possibly correct. Some psychics did predict some kind of epidemic somewhere in the world in 2014, which you might think kind of a safe prediction. One psychic predicted a bad influenza outbreak and the reappearance of SARS in China and Japan. And again, there do seem to be some psychics who claim to have predicted the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. But from what I've seen, these predictions lack one fairly important word in the predictions as made. And that word is, anyone want to guess? It's Ebola.
Oh.
Yeah. It seems to me an Ebola prediction without the word Ebola.
Not so useful.
Or, in fact, an Ebola prediction. Yeah. One psychic, and she may just be my very favorite psychic ever now, Psychic Nikki, Psychic to the Stars.
Nikki.
Yeah, she goes with superfluity in the prediction department. But she predicted riots at a sports stadium in Brazil and riots and explosions in Detroit. Another psychic predicted a gun rampage in Kansas City, Missouri. However, as far as I can tell, no one predicted the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. In fact, as far as I can tell, there were no psychic predictions whatsoever in the history of the world about Ferguson, Missouri.
I think that's pretty safe.
Yeah. Okay, granted, most people have never heard of Ferguson, or had never heard of Ferguson until a couple of weeks ago. But, psychics are psychic, right? So you think they could come up with that, because it's a pretty big deal. It's on all the news, really.
Yeah.
Regardless, to be fair to the psychics, who might have gotten confused about Ferguson, Missouri. I did also look for predictions about protests, riots, military, police action in St. Louis, and I didn't find anything. Detroit, though, watch out. Now, psychics, one of their bread and butter sort of predictions is predictions about the deaths of celebrities. For years, psychics predicted that Elizabeth Taylor would die in the upcoming year. Taylor, of course, was quite elderly and frail and had had a long series of serious health problems. So inevitably, some psychics were eventually correct in their prediction about Elizabeth Taylor. Now, one psychic, again, it's Psychic Nikki, Psychic to the Stars, claims to have predicted the death of Robin Williams. I have a slide, though. It's my first slide of her death and health watch in her list of predictions.
I don't know if you can read these, but
it's not that important. I will tell you, both Robin Williams and Lauren Bacall are on that list. Very impressive, right? No, obviously it's not. Because so is just about every celebrity on the planet, except Don Pardo. He is not on the list, even though he was extremely old.
Yep.
Bob, if you're saying something, no one can hear you.
I like how they have Prime Minister of Australia, whoever that happens to be.
Yeah. And the note at the bottom says, "It does not
be bothered
mean."
to figure out.
Yeah. Well.
Oh,
I like how they
Valerie
said
Harper. What monsters!
I like how they said Chris Angel, and then in parentheses it says Mind Freak. So just in case it's the Chris Angel.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. At the top of her thing, she talks about the predictions she got right last year.
Why is David Hasselhoff the Hawk?
My very favorite one was apparently she correctly predicted a man being eaten by a beaver in Belarus, Russia.
Wow.
A man was killed by a beaver. I don't believe he was eaten by it. And Belarus is not in Russia.
Other than that.
Anyway, but aside from that.
So she got some of the bees right.
Yeah. Anyway, the note at the bottom of that huge list says, "It does not mean the above mentioned will pass, but they might have to watch their health and also watch for danger in their life." So they could get sniffles, and that would count as a hit.
One of the things you should always do when you find a psychic who has a page like this on their website is capture it in a service like Archive Today or Website or Freeze Page, because we have caught psychics on occasion try to retroactively edit one of these pages and claim that they made a prediction that then became true.
Isn't Zsa Zsa Gabor already dead?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure. I wasn't clear about that.
She's on there, but...
But did she die this year?
I don't know. I'm looking that up right now.
But again, she'd be another one who's extremely old and has been in extremely poor health for a really long time.
Oh, no, she's not actually dead.
Holy crap!
Oh, no. She's really sick. She's really sick, though.
Yeah.
So,
and I believe in her 90s. So, yeah.
So it would not be safe
so
to
anyway,
put Goat on this list, that's for sure.
96.
Yeah. It would be almost impossible not to get some hits from this list. She did also predict, quote, that a famous comedian legend will pass, but again, too vague, very meaningless.
Useful, yeah.
And along with celebrity deaths, another really popular thing psychics predict are natural disasters. And again, if you do it right, you're bound to get some hits. So predicting a serious earthquake somewhere on the Ring of Fire is kind of a no-brainer. Predict an earthquake in California or Japan, you're likely to get a hit. If you're sort of vague or conservative about how severe the earthquake will be. Usually, however, psychics don't bother with specific magnitude, precise date, or precise location. And again, this makes their predictions worthless. It certainly doesn't help the people who are in the way of these horrible natural disasters to get out of the way of the horrible natural disasters.
My standard for psychic predictions happens to be predicting the location, magnitude, and death count of multiple earthquakes. That's what will convince me. That's it.
Right.
Well, for 2014, I've seen earthquakes predicted in San Diego, San Francisco, New York, Alaska, New Zealand, Japan, Palm Springs, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, the Caribbean, St. Louis, Chicago, Tennessee, Hawaii, Washington, British Columbia, Toronto, Quebec, Ottawa, the Niagara region, Oklahoma, Texas, Peru, Mexico City, Italy, and around the Seattle Needle, and many more. The word earthquake appears 33 times in Psychic Nikki's predictions.
Wow.
And volcanic eruptions were predicted in Peru, Hawaii, China, at Mount St. Helens, Mount Etna, and, quote-unquote, on an island.
On an island.
Wow.
Yeah. Those weren't all Psychic Nikki. That was just
An island with a tree.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm pretty
Psychic
sure...
Nikki is one of the ones we caught cheating, by the way.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. I'm
Ah.
sure many of the earthquake predictions have already come true, and others will come true. But again, unless they're really much more specific than they are, they're worthless. Now, Psychic Elizabeth Good predicted, excuse me, Iceland would be in the news this year, possibly with a big volcanic eruption. And this is interesting because Iceland does not attract as many like earthquake volcano predictions as the Ring of Fire, but quakes and volcano probably because it's a much smaller country, sparsely populated, that you're not going to have the massive usually, hopefully not. Well, usually you'll hopefully not have massive casualties anyway, but it's less likely there than some like China, for instance. But predictions of earthquakes or volcanoes in Iceland are just really as likely to be fulfilled because the Mid-Atlantic ridge goes right through it. Basically, Iceland is a natural disaster with a constitution. And last week, in the past week, because it's not just the volcanoes and earthquakes, they've got all sorts of things. But in the past week, Iceland's been experiencing an earthquake swarm. And the next slide from the Icelandic Meteorological Office shows the earthquakes. I think these are from about the last day. One I saw a day or two ago was much more massive. Then the next slide shows what's been going on in the last few days. In total, there have been apparently 3,000 earthquakes, approximately 3,000 earthquakes since Saturday.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, the earthquakes themselves, not that big a deal. They've been pretty mild, and they're mostly away from heavily populated areas. And when I say heavily populated areas, I mean Reykjavik.
Basically.
So it's really...
So pretty much they don't have to shake their drinks anymore.
Yeah. However, there are concerns that the swarm may indicate that the volcano Bárðarbunga beneath Vatnsjökull, which is Europe's largest ice cap, may be about to wake up.
Yeah.
And it hasn't erupted in a long time, but it's something like it's produced more basalt in its life than any other volcano or something. It's, in the past has kicked some ass. There were no asses actually there to kick at the time, but, Anyway, at this point, no non-psychic person really knows what's going to happen. It's possible nothing will happen, and that things will settle down, there'll be no eruption. It's possible there'll be a minor eruption that won't really even be visible because the volcano's under a massive sheet of ice. Perhaps Bárðarbunga will erupt spectacularly, producing jökulhlaups, which literally means glacier leaps, or glacial outburst floods. Perhaps another volcano in the same system will erupt. Perhaps a fissure will open to the north of Blaskiewicz. All those are possibilities. Psychics, this is your opportunity to shine. Make a very specific prediction about what will happen in Iceland with dates and times and specifics. I mean, if you can really make psychic predictions, surely you can do better than there'll be an earthquake somewhere in California somewhere in 2014. You already know something's going on in Iceland. How hard can it be to predict the specific outcome?
You're not supposed to help them.
I'll start. And as far as I know, I have no psychic abilities. But I will predict that the earthquake swarm will have subsided substantially by the end of the week. There'll be no visible eruption at this time. However, in May 2016, there'll be another swarm, and Bunga will erupt spectacularly on May 16th. The world's media will arrive to film the Jökulhlaups. When they don't actually transpire by May 25th, they'll bugger off. And then when they begin on May 26th, only the Icelandic media will be around to film them. Okay, psychics, you can do better than that.
I bet they can't.
We need to we're going to put that in the show notes so that we can, check on it later.
Monitor this one.
I'm thinking that, because I know you have a psychic cat.
That's true.
That maybe proximity has caused, the N-rays or whatever the heck is going on.
And he looks a little tiny bit like a very small glacier.
And moves about as much.
Well, that's actually not true.
That's right.
Moves less, I guess? I don't know.
No.
All right, then. Thanks for that, Eve. That was interesting.
Mark Price has a prediction that at least one tornado will happen within a mile of him in the spring of 2015.
Oh, yeah? Does he live in a trailer park?
Oh, my God.
Do you live in a trailer park? Because that's a pretty good prediction. No, never mind. I think there's magnetism or something going on there. Okay, so I'm going to stay here and pause for a few seconds because, people need to get a chance to look at those videos. And hit this button over here, which is the quiet, stompy music that I play before I do this thing. I got a video to show you.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Look at this. This is cool. Come on, play.
Oh, yeah, I knew.
Harvard University. This is actually related to the story I did last week. Kind of, sort of. Check them out. This is a swarm of 1,024 kilobots. That's KILO bot, because they each weigh really nothing. And they have a locomotion by vibrating. They just vibrate and go around. They have a little IR sensor so they can talk to each other. This is the largest swarm experiment by number ever performed. First time they had a coordinating group of over 1,000 little tiny bots. These things, you can actually buy these things for like $30. Yeah, they have these. Is that me I'm hearing? Oh, yeah, I hear audio feedback somewhere. Yeah, they have these geometric shapes or various shapes that they've programmed in. And what happens is the swarm, the individual ones, they get a 2D image of the what they're trying to form, and they can only communicate like locally. So they kind of wander around the group and mold it to the right shape. There are 4 of them that are in a cross shape that form the axis that everyone else forms off of.
Huh.
And these are speeded up videos. They're actually, because it says 40 times faster there. They move pretty slowly, but they are very nicely coordinating the shape intended by local communication. And
how are they have little legs under there? It's hard to see.
They're little metallic stands, and it has like a and it has like a little vibrator, like the same kind of.
So they have no knees.
No, it's the same kind of little motor that's inside your phone that does the vibrate. It just kind of shakes it. and it tries to shake it in the right direction. So they're not very accurate in locomotion, but they're enough, and they can kind of get their position based off the other robots, so they can form up a group. It is really, really cool, and yeah, it's.
So is there a central brain? Is there one thing that tells them where they are in relation to the rest?
There is a computer that disseminates the image intended. So they are given a two-dimensional outline of the shape they're trying to form. But as far as how to form that, they just talk to each other and try to decide where to go. And if someone gets hung up, I'm looking at the wrong person. If someone gets hung up, the other ones work around.
Okay.
So yeah, it is quite an interesting experiment, and very, very simple programming. It's not doing any large scale computation on this. It's pretty much just organic in trying to mold the shape off of the four starters. So yeah, it's very similar to a lot of swarming projects that are out there, except for the fact that the large number scale and the fact that it's cheap. You can actually get these things really cheap, or make them yourself. It's an open source design, and do your own experiments. I plan on having 50,000 of these by next year. I'm kidding.
You had a swarm in something. Maybe it was our show notes, the planning document. You had a swarm of kilobots, and I saw a swarm of killbots.
That's true. There is only one letter away from these things actually swarming and killing people.
Yeah. But it will take them forever to get to.
Spelling is the only thing that will protect us from it.
Yep.
Thank you, English majors.
Yes.
Spell check module, and we're doomed.
That's true. That is the only big story I had this week. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that
we're very small.
Yes, they are very small. They're it's about the size of a small stack of quarters. That's how small they are. So if you're an American, you know what a quarter is. The other thing I want to mention is that the Hitchbot that I mentioned last week, and I mentioned earlier in the summer because they started the hitchhiking across Canada, made it.
Yay!
Made it last week. They're having some kind of event to celebrate because the way it's supposed to work is whoever gets them there is supposed to call a number and then give them time to coordinate a celebration ceremony. And I don't have it in front of me where it's going to be, but it's somewhere out on the west coast of Canada. So awesome. Humans, stop being so nice to them. I'm kidding. Maybe that'll save us all. That's all I have. So, any questions? Bob's yawning. I know it was not a very interesting week for killbots.
I thought they were awesome.
Yeah.
But all I can think about is that Michael Crichton novel, that Swarm.
Oh, is it Prey?
Nano Swarm, yes.
Yeah, which that technology is not too far off either. But
I want to put little road cones on the tops of the robots.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Because that was the invention on the Half Bakery was self-organizing road cones.
Yeah.
So that they would have basically work like that. So they was like, hey, we need road cones around obstacles in the road. Go find them. And the road cones would just go and go out there and organize.
Very cool.
So you'd see road cones wandering around all day.
We could have a whole robot challenge where you'd have the robots that are supposed to navigate a changing maze of road cones.
And the road cones keep moving too.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Well, I think it's really cool that they're teaching robotics in school now. Both of my kids are taking it this year.
Yeah. Yeah. They have summer camps and they have regular programs in school. They have a team at my son's high school, which should start in a few weeks. Who's next? Oh, Tim is next. What are you talking about, Tim?
I'm talking about Ignite.
Ignite. Yes.
Ignite. You ever go to a conference or a meeting at work
No,
and
never.
somebody has an impossibly long slide deck that it's just they're never going to get through in an hour.
That's usually me.
There's only 83 slides, and each one has 500 bullet points on it. Or they clearly have not planned out what they're going to talk about, and so they ramble on and on and on. We've all been to those presentations. And I try to tell people, rehearse your presentations, plan what you're going to say, have it down. And I try to practice that myself. But there's a number of groups who have kind of happened on a way to force people to do that. And one of them is called Pechakucha, and another one is called Ignite. And what both of these groups, I think Pechakucha is the original one. It started in 2006, and oddly enough, or maybe not oddly enough, it started amongst architects, because apparently something that architects do when they get together is, let's see the projects you've worked on. And then they bore people with their slides of every possible detail of the building.
I have been to talks by Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and I can guarantee you that they are the worst slide givers ever. It was like 600 slides long and didn't have the courtesy to pass out cyanide pills beforehand.
Well, there you go. So there was an architecture firm that I assume was based in Japan or had an office in Japan. Anyway, they had some connection to Japan, and they came up with this term, Pechakucha, which means quick talk. Or something along those lines in Japanese. And here's the brilliance of it. You get a fixed number of slides. In Pechakucha, you get 20 slides. You get a fixed amount of time per slide. In Pechakucha, you get 20 seconds per slide. So your talk is 6 minutes and 40 seconds long. And you do not get to operate the slide deck. Somebody says go. You prepare your slides, you prepare your presentation, you hand your 20 slides to somebody, they have loaded them up so that they will auto go, and they point at you and say go. And you have 6 minutes and 40 seconds to say something brilliant, and then you're off. The hook comes out. You are not staying on the stage any longer than that. And the American or the high-tech industry version of it is called Ignite. And I've always thought it would be great to try this at a skeptic conference. And we've tried different experiments in skeptic conferences. We have workshops, we have live streams, we have Skeptic Camp has been the big experiment in the last 6 or 7 years. So I thought, let's have another experiment. Oh, and a big experiment is coming up next week that's turned very successful, which is let's have skeptic events inside other events that allow us to do outreach. And that's what's coming up next week is DragonCon, which is here in Atlanta. Barbara's coming to Atlanta to speak. And we've had a Skeptrack, courtesy of Derek and Swoopy of Skepticality, at DragonCon since 2007. Was the first skeptical programming. They called it Skeptrack starting in 2008. And it's taken off. There's a version at Convergence. There's a version of this at Nine Worlds, London Geek Fest that's on its second year. There's a version of it, or some version of it, at RavenCon. There's a version of it at Balticon.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's probably more that I don't even know about.
There's going to be another one at this year's RavenCon. I got an invite.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So this is sort of becoming a meme. Let's do skeptic tracks at events. So or at sci-fi conventions or sci-fi fantasy, whatever the mix is. And so I volunteered to Derek and said, hey, I've been wanting to do this experiment with Ignite for years. And he said, yeah, I'll give you a time slot. So we've got 8 speakers. Hopefully they'll all show up.
They will.
And we're going to jam them all in an hour. I'm going to have the slide decks all queued up, and each person's going to get 5 minutes. And the slogan for Ignite is enlighten us, but make it quick.
Yep.
And the idea is you just have enough time to get across, a couple of concepts, or maybe talk about your latest project or try to get somebody excited about an idea. And the idea is, hopefully by having lightning talks like this, we can cover more kind of territory. Because
why not call them Blitzsprechen?
Well, I wanted to use something. I wanted to not have to explain the whole thing like I'm doing right now, completely to everyone that I talk to, and by calling it Ignite. Unfortunately, Ignite is kind of an open source thing. You just ask them, and as long as you follow certain rules, they'll let you use their name and logo. That some people know what Ignite is, and that helps explain it. So we decided to go with Ignite because it's a little bit less of an explanation. And Ignite is 20 slides, 15 seconds each, so you have a slightly shorter time, so 5 minutes each presentation.
Yep.
So we'll see how it goes, and if it goes well, maybe we'll make it a regular thing at Skeptrack. Maybe I'll come to a different convention and we'll do it there and try to have lightning talks and get some of these smaller topics, maybe things that the curators of the convention maybe wouldn't want to allocate an entire hour for, but it's like, oh, well, I'll let you talk about that for 5 minutes. And avoid PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. In fact, the way most of these talks work, you don't use bullet points at all because the slides are only up for 15 seconds. There's no time to read anything. So typically what most people do is just use photos. Just something that illustrates points, which is probably a good idea for regular presentations too, but in this format, you're kind of forced into that. So we're going to do it. It's going to be on Monday, so a week from this Monday, the first session up in the morning at 10 a.m. at Skeptrack, and I believe they will be live streaming again, so if you're not coming to DragonCon, you should be able to see these talks. And the standard with Ignite is that all the talks are recorded, so we're going to try to record them and get them put up. And they're perfect for YouTube at 5 minutes each.
Interesting.
So,
any spoilers on what topics might be?
Well,
one of them.
Somebody's going to be talking about Ernest Shackleton. Somebody's going to be talking about asteroids hitting the Earth.
Interesting.
We've got a variety of different things, so it's going to be fun. It's going to be kind of neat. You'll be able to come in and see a whole bunch of different stuff in an hour.
Yeah, I've been to a number of Ignites. They have them here in Baltimore every quarter, roughly. And the ones they do here are focused on improvement of the city. So sometimes you have businesses talk about their business, or nonprofits talk about their programs, or sometimes you have students that do talks about something relevant to improving the city. And then sometimes you have weird stuff.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting, and it's always neat to see what you can pack into that short period of time. And part of the experience, I know the events, I don't know if you get, because I know Skeptrack is kind of like this. Is it because it's a small group, you get socialized time afterwards. So
right.
They introduce their ideas, and then you can talk to them afterwards. So
yeah, I'm not sure. We're jamming a lot into an hour, so we're not going to quite have that full experience. Yeah, normally you do it as like an evening thing.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of presentations, and then you socialize, and sometimes people do what they call PowerPoint karaoke afterwards. And maybe, one of these days I'll try to do it that way. I may do it as
Wait.
PowerPoint karaoke?
What?
I know, I'm curious too.
There's a bunch of folks in kind of the skeptic cloud that do this, but my understanding is what you do is you take a bunch of the slides out of other people's decks and you shuffle them up, and you make a slide deck of random slides from people's PowerPoints, and then you put a speaker up there.
Oh God, that would be awesome!
You give them a set of slides, and it's like, here, give a talk to these 8 slides, and you see what happens, and they don't know what's coming up.
PowerPoint improv?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so we're not going to be
wonderful.
doing that at DragonCon, but maybe we'll try that at another
That's
thing.
so cool.
So I hope this goes well, and maybe we'll make it a regular thing, and it'll become like Skeptic Camp. It'll be a regular thing that different skeptic groups do. I want to give a shout out to the Liverpool skeptics, who Liverpool has a very active Ignite community, and the Merseyside skeptics and the other folks from Liverpool go to that a lot. And if you look at my YouTube channel, and I'll have a link in the show notes, I actually curated a bunch of the videos from their skeptical talks. So folks have done skeptical Ignites. This is just the first time we've done an entirely skeptical Ignite.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. I hope it goes well. I'm looking forward to the feedback on that. Thanks, Tim.
You're
That's
welcome.
a cool topic. Bob is next. Bob is going to be storming the castle.
Yes.
I think
So,
it'll take a miracle.
yeah, well, I have no joke. So, after a week of riots in St. Louis, the fighting in the West Bank, um, you know, beheadings and suicides and all sorts of horrible stuff, I thought that, you know, maybe I should have a happier story this week. But no, I went with Ebola. A scary number of stories came out this week that illustrate how irrationality can make the world more dangerous for everyone. In Monrovia, the capital of Liberia, a large quarantine station for Ebola patients was established in the slums of West Point, by all accounts one of the poorest sections of Liberia. The slum is unplanned, which means that there is no, infrastructure. It's kind of shanties that are thrown up. There's no sewage. There's no water. It's cramped. You can have up to 7 people in a room. It's not a great place to have Ebola. Well, the station, the monitoring station in this part of town, opened last week, and it became the center of protests in the neighborhood. On Saturday morning, officials showed up at the station, and this is like 2 days after it opened. Officials showed up at the station to clear and bury patients who had died overnight. When they arrived, they met a crowd, and the crowd turned them back. And apparently, they were encouraged by their success at turning back this group of officials, and they stormed the quarantine. Patients who are reported to be voluntary voluntary inpatients were ordered out of quarantine, and they took their stuff with them, including bloody and soiled blankets and clothes. There was also a report of run-of-the-mill looting of medical supplies. What motivated the crowd to do this is kind of unclear. There is a lot of speculation, and there are some interviews with some people who were there. The 2 main ideas that I've seen are the first one was that it's a bunch of Ebola deniers, people who don't think that Ebola is a real disease, and there were clearly some people who thought that who were
Really?
there. Yeah. Well, what they say is that it's malaria, or any number.
Just malaria.
Right. Yeah. That it's malaria or some other disease that will cause a fever. There are any number. There's one guy who said there are any number of diseases that'll kill you.
True, but no.
Yeah, So, and this is a problem because if patients and their families go into situations, say if someone's sick and you think that they have malaria or whatever, and you want to stop the spread of it, sure, you're treating grandma inside a mosquito net, but meanwhile, when you wipe her brow, you're catching Ebola, right? So the other idea that I saw in the news reports was that the local people were suspicious about what was going on inside the facility, and this is where we see this age-old conspiracy principle of where you have a gap in your knowledge, people paper over it with other stories, and when you live in a state of fear, you often paper over it with scary stories. And also, I'm not sure that they trust the government there either. Is that they were positing that the government and these outsiders were, including Médecins Sans Frontières, were bringing in sick people to their community, which is not exactly true, and certainly not with malicious intent. 17 patients who fled following this disappeared into the West Point area. Quite possibly the worst possible place to have unaccounted for Ebola patients. It sounds like some may be trickling back into the station. However, Monrovian authorities have quarantined the entire West Point, effectively isolating somewhere between 50 and 70,000 people in the area. And they did that overnight. So people woke up the next day, realized they couldn't get out of this area. And today, following an attempt by a crowd to break that quarantine, we learned that the government is enforcing it with live ammunition and tear gas. So this is, yeah, I know, this actually just happened, or at least the news reports last couple hours that they had tried to break through. So this is kind of like a perfect storm of bad. The other side of this, or at least on another side of a border in Sierra Leone, was, and this was just reported on Doubtful News, that 365 fatal cases in that country can be traced back to a traditional healer and herbalist who claimed that she could treat Ebola. She contracted the disease, and her burial was kind of the epicenter of large outbreaks in women around the country. And she was saying that she had this cure, and people were streaming across the border, and this is what happens. I don't know. And you wonder, when you think about the relationship between an environment and the spread of a disease, Ebola seems perfect for this type of situation where you have social customs that are contributing to the spread. People are they wash the bodies personally and bury the bodies, and people have close contact with the sick. Also, it turns out that 75% of the people who are dying are women, because women are the caregivers. So, this is kind of a really bad situation. Something, is it 1,200 people have died? So at least that at this point. And even though the death rate is not the, you see people, a lot of the reports say 90% death rate, but not this time. So it's only around 50% right now for this outbreak. But that is all the Ebola you can handle. And just so, could you bring up the slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it's so cute.
It looks so cute.
Ebola.
Ebola is so cute.
We do microbe.
There you go.
Yeah. So. I really like. I have a sad.
Yes.
And there were some really good interviews on NPR this week with people who were fighting it, and they just said that they're completely overwhelmed and that they need more resources and it's not coming. I think Air France can't get crews to fly into the region anymore. So yeah, and there is a report of a possible case in California, but so far none of those seem to have panned out. But yeah, they're on alert.
Well, so Blake on Twitter wants to know if they're saying Ebola is an inside job.
In fact, that's one of the things that they're saying, and you could do a write-up of how HIV/AIDS was thought to be a weapon that was deployed against the African continent in order to steal its resources. I would not be the least bit surprised if we saw that in relationship to Ebola.
And of course, you went the whole conspiracy theory route. I was actually thinking it was a joke because it's actually an inside job. It's
yes.
And it's Blake.
That was the pun, Blake.
Oh,
yeah.
I get it. That was a humor. Ha ha ha.
I was trying to break the evil mood that you just created.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to bring it back.
No, I failed. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. Talk to someone else, Brian.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, thanks for piling on some more shit this week. Thanks, Bob.
It was my pleasure.
This has not been a good week for a lot of reasons. Let's see. Barb. Barb, blue's my favorite color. And I'm curious about what you're going to talk about because I saw one of your slides, and I'm thinking this has something to do with perception of color, but I don't know. I'm curious.
A little bit. I'm going to talk about color.
Yay.
Well, first I'm going to read you a quote, and this is from a video that I just wrote a blog post today so you can get a little more detail, but or maybe different set of details. But I'll try to cover some stuff that's not on the blog post too. From this video, this was a CBS News video, and I guess you could call her the anchor woman, sort of, said, just the color of the room can play a huge role in how we feel and act. Paint the walls blue, and studies show you may be more creative. May. I like how they put the may in there. Paint them red, and you may be more vigilant or more sexy. Change to green to calm yourself down. But if you really want something off the wall, paint those walls a certain shade of pink. And then she goes on to interview a guy who wrote a book about something we call Baker Miller pink. If you have not heard of Baker Miller pink, it is a shade of pink that was used to paint the inside of a prison.
Oh, yeah.
And the warden was absolutely convinced that it calmed the prisoners down. So these types of claims, I mean, you can find them all over the place. There are books about it. They teach it in art schools. My husband was taught it. He went to Savannah College of Art and Design and had a color theory class, which you do. And part of that class was telling him all the effects that color has on human beings. And it's all bullshit. Not all of it entirely, but most of it. Here's the problem.
Well, I just want to point out that the salmon color of your back wall is making everyone very attentive.
It's not salmon. It's brown.
Oh, it looks salmon on the video, so maybe. No, so there you go. It works anyway.
Well, there you go. Now the contrasts, color contrasts actually they matter, but they don't necessarily matter in the long term. So I'd heard these myths lots and lots before, and when I was an undergrad and I had to do a research project, your very first research project, this was something that interested me a great deal, and I decided I want to test this and find out if it's true. So I did as much research as I could and then tested it. And what I found was that most of the research in this area is just really bad. Just really, really bad. I mean, horrible methodologies. Mostly because researchers don't understand what color is and don't know the anatomy of the eye. Things like that. Don't define emotion very well. A lot of them aren't even psychologists. At least the older research, the research that I was looking at, because this was quite a long time ago. I spent more than a decade studying this, and in fact it was the topic of my master's thesis. And I can tell you that painting your walls gray will not hurt your sex life, which was what another article said. It said, gray bedrooms are major mood colors, dampening of the prospect of sex. If you want to get it on with your honey, paint your love nest purple instead.
Purple?
Well, this explains why I prefer the kitchen. I'm just saying.
But they say they say people in purple bedrooms had sex an average of 3.49 times per week, followed next by red, sky blue, and pink. Gray came in last at 1.8 times per week. Can anybody guess what explanation you might have for that? Other than the color creates a mood.
I'll give you a hint.
People like gray walls?
Go for...
You got it, yeah. Basically, people who choose to paint their rooms those colors are different People who choose to paint their rooms gray are different than people who choose to paint their rooms purple. And they're different in ways that clearly this might have had this effect. I didn't read that survey, so I don't know. It was a survey too. We don't know where the survey was placed. We don't know, what kind of people responded. There could be some response bias, things like that. There's lots of explanations other than the color. And if you want to find out if color affects emotion, you have to do what we call a true experiment, which is you have to randomly assign people to the conditions that they're in. They have to be randomly assigned. They cannot choose it themselves.
Oh, you could do a whole reality show based on this. We're going to paint your bedrooms random colors.
Yes, we could.
Well, we'll follow it around with the cameras all.
But here's the problem.
Awesome.
You also have to define color, which means that you've got to control the ambient lighting. You've got to use exact colors, which most of these researchers did not do. They just said red or blue. Well, now if you would like to bring up the slide, this is what the slide is all about. Which one of these things is blue?
Yes.
Some would argue that they're all blue. So we've got a problem there. You have to define.
Kind of purple.
You have to define the color.
Cobalt.
You've got to take into consideration saturation. You've got to take into consideration brightness. And you've got to take into consideration hue. And then there's defining emotions. If you define emotions using just words, you've got a problem, because not all emotions mean the same. Not all emotion words mean the same thing to everybody. So the example that I used in the blog post, which is one of my favorites, is grief, because there can be vastly different understandings of what grief is.
Why was that funny, Bob?
Bob thinks grief is hilarious.
Not what causes it, but what you feel about what you're feeling.
No, I just saw Dr. Atlantis' tweet.
Yes.
Poppycock.
Great time to
Mrs. Dr. Atlantis and I have great bedroom walls, and we've had sex dozens of times. Oh, that was really good.
That was good.
Okay. So anyway, I've forgotten where I was at.
Frequency.
Huh?
No, never mind.
I think I was talking about emotions. So if I say grief to you, for some people that's going to mean something very quiet and calm and something that makes them want to curl up into a ball. And for other people, it's very angry. They want to run around and punch something. So grief can mean different things. Language is a problem. So you have to find a way to define emotions that is somewhat objective. And there are ways to measure emotions physiologically, which is what I did for my master's thesis. So you can actually measure these if you define them well. None of the research when I first started doing this did any of that. There's been better research since then, particularly with things like red pens in college and things like that. But this was a serious problem a long time ago. So when you see claims like this, if there are any citations, one of the things you might find is a bunch of books in the citations written by somebody named Faber Buren, who research is just bad. It's just bad. Mm-hmm. And he cites himself all the time. So at least half of his citations are articles, journal articles that he wrote. And the findings that I have had over more than a decade of studying this, and having students study it as well, don't match up with any of these claims. So here's some of I'm just going to go through those claims that I read to you one at a time. Just the color of the room can play a huge role in how we feel and act. Well, that's a really vague statement. My opinion is it's not true, but you could worm your way into it. Paint the walls blue and studies show that you may be more creative. I don't even know where she got that one. I've never heard that one. It could be a cultural association. A lot of times we have cultural associations with colors. Green is envy, red is anger, those types of things. And so if you ask somebody, how does this color make you feel, a lot of times what you're tapping into is what they think they're supposed to feel when they look at it because of the cultural association. But those associations are actually vastly different across cultures. There's only a few colors where the associations are very similar, like black, white, and red. They're very similar across cultures. The idea is.
Blue jokes are green jokes in Spanish.
Aha, there you go.
You're
Paint them red and you may be more vigilant or more sexy. Well, this one is probably the closest to what I've found. What I found over 10 years of studying is pretty robust findings that red causes more arousal than, say, blue and yellow. But arousal doesn't necessarily mean sexual arousal. It just means arousal. It's very, very basic. I mean, it's a single dimension. The next one is change to green and calm yourself down. Well, that doesn't match my findings at all, because in all of my findings, green is always more arousing than blue and yellow. Maybe not statistically significant, but at times it is. Sometimes it's almost as high. It's indistinguishable from red.
Particularly amongst red-green colorblind people.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a different issue, though.
Yeah, we don't have
and I would go into that, but that would take. Then I'd have to explain why this all makes sense. Actually, why my findings make sense and these claims don't. But if you really want something off the wall, paint those walls a certain shade of pink. Well, the claim is that this Baker Miller pink calms people down. Unfortunately, pink is a lighter shade of red, so that does not work with my findings. It's the opposite of what I would expect. So I guess.
So what bucket would salmon go into?
Probably pinkish. But
Is it pink or is it orange?
Not red. It's not red. It's got some yellow in it. So.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's that problem of definition that I was talking about. So anyway, I think what people really want to know is what color should they paint the walls, and I'm going to tell you, you paint your walls any damn color you want, because it doesn't matter. Because even though I said that I have pretty robust findings that red is more arousing and green tends to be more arousing than blue and yellow, the truth of the matter is we adapt so quickly to any stimulus, especially visual stimuli, so quickly that it doesn't matter. Within a few minutes, actually within a few seconds of being in a room, you're not even noticing the walls. And if you're paying attention to a person, if you're paying attention to a TV, if you've got your eyes closed because you're asleep, if you're looking at a computer screen, if you're not staring at the walls and thinking about the color doesn't matter. You're not even processing it. Nobody cares. It's bullshit.
However, if you paint your walls with bullshit, that's a whole different thing.
Well, then it'll smell, and then you've got the whole smell issue.
Yeah, I think there are other issues involved in that. Just thinking out loud.
So that's my as simple as I can make it rant about that.
Awesome.
That was a pretty good episode of bullshit. But you were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was channeling Penn there.
But you're missing the part where you should have had a slide in there that had the picture of somebody that pushes this stuff, and then you switch to that slide and say, and then there's this asshole.
And throw some naked women in there too.
Well, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, and possibly naked men too, to be fair.
Sure, why not?
That's true. Yeah, random nakedness is cornerstone of that show. What's coincidental is that I actually used to work for a company that did quality control instruments for color. They made the instruments that you get and that you go to in like the hardware store that would match paint colors to. Yeah. You bring in like a swath of something, and then it would decide how to mix the paint to make it match. And other instruments that were used for manufacture of textiles and plastics and things like this, which have to be color matched in order to be manufactured properly. And I learned a little bit about color science. It's based on the way the eye works and what human eye can see, and it's not a fixed scale. It's based on statistics of studies that were done with large groups of people. And it's a three-dimensional space, which most people don't realize.
Yeah.
There is hue, there's brightness, and then there's also chroma, which is a cross dimension. So you have colors that don't go in the rainbow. Yeah, which saturation is another name for it. And it's really interesting and kind of bizarre, and it's not a symmetrical space either. Human eye can see pastel differences very well, while darker colors, especially greens, we cannot tell the difference between a lot of colors.
A lot of that has to do with the way our receptors work.
Yeah,
They're not simple. We don't have these little receptors say, oh, that's green, oh, that's red. It's much more complex than that.
I don't have those at all.
Okay. And
Any
then
of them? So you see in black and white?
No, I'm red-green colorblind. So like
So
Christmas
you're missing one of them.
Christmas is dull as hell.
Here's the thing, though. You're only missing one cone, and yet the number of colors that you can see is reduced exponentially. It's amazing. So every cone you add it just multiplies what you can see. It's amazing. Well, think about this. There's a shrimp out there that has 10 different cones.
Yeah.
Wow.
What must that look like?
Shrimp.
Is it the Geordie fish?
Basically.
I can't even imagine what that looks like.
Well, there's lots of.
Now I've got a fish in my head with
Lots of.
Is
colors.
it translating for you? Oh, sorry. Different fish.
But yeah, I think color is absolutely fascinating, which is why I studied it for so long. It's an absolutely fascinating area, but you can't study it unless you know a little bit about what it is.
Yeah.
And it's just not that simple. And I think that there is something to the immediate effects of viewing, different hues and so forth. And I think it all has to do with how much energy the body has to put into interpreting it, because there are differences in the number of receptors that we have for different wavelengths, and the way those mix is different.
Yeah, it could be evolutionary pressures as well. I mean, seeing
it.
certain color differences may be more, give us a slight advantage to seeing other things, depending on, I don't know. I'd have to delve into some kind of tenuous evolutionary psychology stuff to get to the, I guess. No,
we could talk. I've studied it. I could give you the short.
It's fascinating stuff. Thanks. What's left? Oh, thank you, Barbara. I guess that's everybody. Everybody did their shtick. Let's wrap up. There's one question in the queue that we don't really have a lot of time to do it. Maybe we'll do that in a future episode. Do a retrospective on episodes. We should have maybe planned for that, have time to do that.
Yeah.
Would have been interesting to talk about our favorite stuff. Nobody's prepared, so there you go. I'm sorry, Bill. That was a great question. We'll come back to you in a future episode. But let's do the trivia question.
Oh, a lot of people got it right.
Yeah, I saw that.
A lot of people listened to Skepticality, and I actually gave the answer to this away in Skepticality this week. So good for you. And the winner, Amanda got it right, but 5 seconds before her.
Oh, snap!
Snatched! 5 seconds, Nigel got it before her.
That's
sorry,
the Australian difference is what that is.
I was going to make a comment about time travel and her getting the questions right every week, but wow, somebody beat her to it. Wow. Okay. Well, nobody even came close. I think that people are having trouble seeing the monitors behind me. I'm going to have to do some adjustment to make these a little bit more visible. But, there were some guesses. There was the Knights of Bad Acidum, which was not even close. And I think there were a couple of other guesses that weren't close as well. This is a Joss Whedon week. And on my left, your right, is a set of clips from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And on the right is clips from the Terminator TV series, which I really enjoyed. So I'm sorry that
that certainly was Buffy.
Yeah.
Okay then. Announcements and book time, right? Right. Are there announcements?
Yes.
Yes, there are some announcements. Let me do the announcements while you guys find your books. You have books. Right there where it says announcements. Eve and Tim they both have segments on this week's episode of Skepticality.
Yep.
Which is a great show. You guys could check it out. I mean, obviously the people who got the question right listen to that show as well. Also, Tim, you want to do this?
Oh yeah, I've been plugging this relentlessly for the last few weeks. So soon you will not have to hear this anymore because it's coming up a week from tomorrow, the Atlanta Star Party. And there's been some exciting additions to it this week. They now have a student discount, so if you're a student, you can get a cheaper ticket. There's an improved menu. We have a nice caterer comes in and brings some food, and people can have some wine and beer and have some nice food. And they've added vegan and vegetarian and gluten-free options for folks who need those sorts of things. And there is an online list of all the cool items that are going to be in the silent auction, so you can get a peek at what the silent auction is all about before you arrive at the event and figure out what you want to put your bids in. And I think there's even a way, if you can't attend, to put some bids in through that website. But we'll have those links in the show notes, and you can still register. You can still get $5 off for entering Krelnick 2014 when you register. So a week from tomorrow at Emory's Math and Science Building, and I'll be there running one of these with a bunch of astronomers. So if you can't come to Atlanta, watch my social media and you'll see an invite to a hangout that night. We'll be having a virtual star party as part of the real star party.
Okay, thanks. Any other announcements? I think that was all that was in the notes. But no?
Yep.
Okay, who wants to go first with the book time stuff?
I will.
Go for it.
Imagine the following scene. One comfortable summer evening, you're sitting out on your lawn, a glass of chilled white wine by your side. You're idly tossing a small ball from hand to hand. On a whim, you throw it high into the air. It shoots skyward, gradually slows under the pull of gravity, stops at the apex of its trajectory, and then begins to fall, gathering pace, moving faster and faster until it lands, plop, right in your wine glass.
Splash. Oh, man. Who's next? Eve?
When Alfred Russel Wallace sent Samuel Butler a copy of his pamphlet, Miracles in Modern Spiritualism, Butler wrote me, Wallace, 3 letters in a week, chiefly to explain that the whole subject bored him. In the second letter, Butler wrote, granted that wonderful spirit forms have been seen and touched and then disappeared, and that there has been no delusion, no trickery. Well, I don't care. I get along quite nicely as I am. I don't want them to meddle with me. I had a very dear friend once whom I believed to be dying, and so did she. We discussed the question whether she could communicate with me after death. Promise, I said very solemnly, that if you find there are means of visiting me here on Earth, that if you can send a message to me, you will never avail yourself of the means, nor let me hear from you when you were once departed. Unfortunately, she recovered and never forgave me. If she had died, she would have come back if she could. Of that I am certain by her subsequent behavior to me. I believe my instinct was perfectly right, and I will go further. If ever a spirit form takes to coming near me, I shall not be content with trying to grasp it, but in the interest of science, I will shoot it.
Nice. Wow. Go ahead, Bob.
Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear, and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near.
That's it?
That's it.
No actual prophecy?
It's all crazy shit after this.
Oh, okay. Go, Tim.
A much hyped 2-hour Discovery Channel documentary aired on June 1st, 2014, titled Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives. The program delved into a decades-old pseudo-mystery known as the Dyatlov Pass incident, in which 9 Russian skiers died under unclear circumstances in the Ural Mountains. The show was packed with dramatic found footage recreations, dubious daring-do, a pulse-pounding score, and piles of speculation. Though not as blatantly hokey and contrived as the infamous pseudo-documentary Animal Planet program Mermaids, The Body Found, which fooled thousands of people, gave credence to the discredited aquatic ape theory, and spurred the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association or Administration To put a note on their website debunking the existence of mermaids, it is nonetheless a textbook example of modern cable TV mystery mongering and thus merits a closer look.
Okay. I'm cheating on this one a little bit. I'm just telling you that up front. Blue gives the feeling of distance. Artists use it to show perspective. This is a good way to understand the energy of the color blue. It also allows us to look beyond and increase our perspective outward. It contains a cool vibration that is helpful to communication. The vibration of blue can be used to open energy flow where it is blocked, using the blue to relax and encourage the feelings of communication and peace.
Bullshit.
And then there's this guy.
There's this asshole.
What's your book, Barbara?
The Improbability Principle, Why Coincidences, Miracles, and Rare Events Happen Every Day by David J. Hand.
Cool. Eve?
Well, that was Samuel Butler, obviously, quoted in The Spiritualists by Ruth Brandon.
Interesting. Bob?
I was reading from the Book of Revelation, which was written by God.
Thank you.
Okay. Which translation?
This is the very small translation that was handed out to me on my campus.
Oh. Okay. Whatever. Go ahead, Tim.
I was reading from an article in the latest Skeptical Inquirer, which just arrived in my mailbox, and which, I will remind you, has skeptical anniversaries on the back page.
Yay. Awesome. I cheated. Mine is not actually a book. Because we were talking
Tim's
about
wasn't
color.
either. Tim's wasn't either.
Yeah. I looked this up on the web on one of my go-to websites called Emily Gems. And it's actually the same content of that Gem Healy book that's behind me on the shelf. I didn't want to have to go grab, but it made me think of that when we were talking
in my
about
defense,
colors.
people who work in the magazine industry, when they are putting a magazine together, refer to it as the book.
Well,
That's interesting.
mine is the Hitchhiker's Guide, the reality version.
Aha.
So never mind. So there you go. I cheated. I admit it, but I have at least one chance to cheat, right? Right.
Are you going to apologize?
No, I am not going to apologize to this asshole.
Now we're all channeling Pen.
I know. Are we done? We're done. Do we have any other questions that were sitting out there? No? Maybe? I don't know. Anyway, it's time to dance. We're way over. Thank you all for watching. This has been fun. 100 episodes. I can't believe this. And this time, that's our next week's trivia question is how many episodes do we actually get the credit correct? Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of What'sTheHarm.net, Skeptical Humanities, myself, I'm CBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo is designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com, and our theme music is by Musicant and Music.